Hello, everybody. Welcome to our special event today, remembering Roma Enslavement, organized by Archer, American Romanian Coalition for Human and Equal Rights in collaboration with ARCS, Project American Romanian Cultural Society, represented today here by Otilia Baraboi, the director. I'm Mihaela Campion from Archer, and I'm joined today by Andrea Motram from Archer as well, my friend and colleague. And the three of us, Otilia, Andrea, and myself, are going to moderate the conversation around this important topic that we are going to discuss today. Our guest speakers are absolutely incredible. Their bios are remarkable, and I will not have enough words to present everything that is in their bios. So therefore, I'm going to choose what I believe is the most significant in their achievements. And the rest of it, you can find out more in the bios that Andrea are going to post, and also in the event post on Facebook, where you can check their achievements in the discussion section. I'm going to start with Alina because we just watched the documentary that she directed, Letter of Forgiveness. And Alina is, I mean, her representation is absolutely amazing. She's the director of this short documentary, also an actress and a playwright, the winner of the Best Actress Award at the German Actors Guild Awards 2020 for her leading role in Gypsy Queen. And in case you haven't seen that movie, I highly recommend it. It's absolutely incredible. She's also a nominee for Best Actress of the German Film Awards 2020 and the representative of Romania in the Cannes International Film Festival 2018 for her, excuse me, for her leading role in Alone at My Wedding. Alina is the first one in her family to graduate high school. But she didn't stop. She's unstoppable, as you can all know probably by now. She succeeded to graduate from Tisch School of the Arts in New York and obtained a Master's of Arts. She obtained also a Master's from Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London, becoming an award-winning actress and the first Roma theater and film director of Romania. Congratulations, Alina, and thank you for joining us today. We feel really honored and grateful to have you here with us.
Thank you very much. I'm also very honored to be with you, even though we're not physically close. I'm very, very honored to be in your presence.
Thank you. Yeah, we are connected, you know, heart to heart and soul to soul.
Exactly.
Next, remarkable guest speaker of today is Dr. Mario Sturda, professor in Central and Eastern European biomedicine at Oxford Brookes University, UK. He's originally from Maramureș in Romania, and he has been teaching at Oxford for many years. He is also the author of numerous books and publications and articles. He's also the founder and director of the Cantemir Institute at the University of Oxford, and founder of the working group of the history of eugenics and race, established in 2006. He is a member of Academia Europaea, fellow of the Royal Historical Society, and fellow of the Galton Institute. Welcome, Marius. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm sorry to disappoint those of you who probably wanted to have Marius Stan instead of Marius Turda, but you know, hopefully it wouldn't be too bad a choice to have me amongst you. It's a truly an honor, and I'm very, very pleased to meet you, Alina, and to see Magda, Adrian again.
Yeah, and I have to apologize that you know the custom in Romania when you baptize someone, and I have to offer you a gift as well. So it's going to come in the mail. Yeah. Dr. Margareta, Magda, I love to say Magda, it's closer to me. Matache is our guest speaker today, honored guest speaker. She's a justice activist and scholar from Romania, director of the FXB Center for Health and Human Rights, Roma program, and a Harvard instructor. Author of numerous publications, an activist. She's like, what else you can say about her activism and academic achievements? Thank you, Magda, for joining us today. I'm really excited to have you here, and thank you for accepting our invitation and helping me to organize this. I have to recognize you were the engine of this for a long time already.
Thank you so much, Mihaela, for organizing the event. It's such a great pleasure to be here today and to have this conversation with Alina, Marius, Adrian, and such a great pleasure to also see Otilia and Andrea in the conversation. I look forward to discussing with you.
Thank you. And last but not least is Adrian Nicolae Furtuna from Bucharest. So happy to have Bucharest represented here by you and Alina today. Adrian is graduated from the Faculty of Sociology of the University of Bucharest, and he holds a master's degree in Advanced Sociological Research. And currently he is enrolled as a PhD student at the Quality of Life Research Institute, specializing in the field of the social memory of Roma slavery. 15 years of intense activity, publishing research papers, and also working on a book, as far as I remember. Welcome, Adrian. Thank you for being here with us today. We really appreciate your presence, and we are looking forward for a very interesting, needed, and urgent conversation with all of you today.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
I would like to ask Otilia to start on a continuum, because we just watched the movie and it's so powerful and it's so, I don't know, it's really like, you know, my heart is beating a little bit faster from watching it second time. So Otilia, if you have any comments or questions for Alina, I would love to invite you to start the conversation.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alina. I'm so glad that we get the chance to continue our conversation that we started at the Romanian Film Festival in November. And I was telling everyone, I don't know if you heard, that actually this film, Letter of Forgiveness and Gypsy Queen, were the mostly viewed films at the film festival, actually. So just to tell you how successful this short was. It's really amazing that you're also the director and you play the main part as well. And I just wanted, I didn't get the chance to ask you that, but can you tell us now, how did you find the story? Because I know there's a story behind it, and what moment in history does it represent exactly? Because it's an important moment behind the history that we know. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I will just want to say before I answer the question that even I, watching it today, I feel it's incredible. Incredible for me to believe that I managed to pull it through. I'm not speaking about the quality of that's for the public to decide, but for me as the insider, I just have to mention how impossible was this to be made. I am the producer of this film, and it has been really impossible to achieve this. And it's like I feel as if inside of me it's like a small girl looking at it and still being mesmerized by the fact that it exists. Now it exists and it's in the world, and people from all over the world can see it. And I'm very, very honored to receive, to connect heart by heart with other people that are receiving it. I'm very honored, and thank you so much. And still mesmerized that we pull it through, me and the whole team. This dream of making it a feature has started by me documenting Roma slavery for a theater play. So back then I was researching Roma historians' books like the one that Petre Percut wrote, and I was documenting myself, documenting Roma slavery. And at one point, I found this in a memoir of Sion, and there was very much, obviously, was from his personal experience about his life, and that at one point he met Maria, that was the mother of this boy whose death has brought sooner the abolition of Roma slavery. And that was an interesting point for me to start a story. So I read that, and then I made it my own. I wanted to pull its corners closer to my heart, closer to my experience, so that this is from a Roma point of view, as if that Roma could speak now and tell us what he or she felt in that moment. Obviously, it's also fictionalized because, yeah, it's part of a real story that is also fictionalized. And I worked together with Luisa Medelanu from Roma Education Fund, that I saw her as well in the conversation now. Hi, Luisa. And at one point, it was very hard to separate myself from the fiction and from reality, because at one point I was very, very stressed by all that the historical was bringing. For example, we were on the set and I was very nervous that, oh my God, how would you greet a ruler coming in the house? What would be the custom? What would they eat? So all these details at one point were very, very stressful for me. And then at one point I had to relax and say, okay, I need to tell a story first, and then to add the all the historical elements to it, but to focus on the storytelling. Because at one point, even how to show a washroom where the two characters go, and I cleaned that stain on the dress. That was a huge stress for me, because everybody from the team were also stressed. Because how a washroom from 1857 would look like. They were the carpet, the paintings, everybody was very, very stressed. So I said to them that we should all try our best to tell this story, but mainly focus on the storytelling and less on the 100% accuracy of historical details like this. So to answer and to finish answering your question, this is dated around closer to the abolition of the slavery, closer to 1850 something, 56, 57, around that point. This would be a very small slice from a bigger story where we would find out about Dinka's life, about Maria's life more. And at this point in the story, I'm not sure if I give a spoiler alert, but he he will commit suicide, and and then his death would bring the ruler and the owner to make everybody abolish slavery sooner. Sorry for the spoiler alert, but hopefully you will forget this information by the time I will have all the resources to make a feature film.
Thank you so much, Alina. And we do have a question from the audience, actually, in the chat. I am curious how it was documented. I read the version of the science book and I'm eager to learn more. Were you able to trace the street and the house where this happened?
The street, the house, for example, it exists. It was called Palatul Cantacuzinilor, the palace, the Cantacuzino Palace, and then changed to Palatul Copiilor, the Children's Palace, and it still exists as a building. But to be honest with you, I do not know the exact street by name. Yeah, and it was an idea for us to even go there to film it there, but production-wise, it was a bit more difficult, so we sticked with something closer to Bucharest.
Thank you. And I have other questions, but I think we should go on with the other guests because there's so many other interesting things to talk about.
We'll come back for sure.
Yes.
Because it's part of the theme of today. Well, the event is organized because Roma had been enslaved for 5 centuries in Wallachia and Moldova. We celebrate today the freedom which came 165 years ago. And at the same time, the public recognition of the loss, of the suffering and trauma, I would say, it's still not fully recognized and acknowledged. So I would like, in order to give us a bigger picture of the historical events, I would like to ask Adrian if you can help us understand a little bit more about the slavery, about what happened back then and what's, what was the situation? Why do we call it slavery? And maybe if you can touch a little bit on the fact that for so many years, we haven't been taught, we haven't been aware of the true history of Roma suffering in Romania.
Thank you. I will try very shortly to speak a little bit about the origins of Roma slavery in the Romanian Principalities. So I must say that Viorel Achim, that is a very known historian in Romania, he says that the origins of the slavery in the Principalities until now have not formed the basis of an independent study in the Romanian historiography. So the answer until now is that we don't truly know until now the origins of the Roma slavery. We have only some theories regarding the fact how the Roma were enslaved in the Romanian territory. The most known theory on this regard, it's the theory of Nicolae Iorga, that he's saying that the Roma were enslaved together with, they were slaves of the Tatars, and after that they also became the slaves of the Romanian. Other writers explain the appearance of the slavery in the Romanian territories with the reference to the Romanian battles with the Tatars. As a result of these battles, the Roma captured from the Tatars were transformed into slaves. But this, like I said, are only theories on regard on how we were enslaved here. Another important historian, Petre Petcuț, he's launching the theory that Roma came from the south of the Danube, like free people in a way, because there are some sources that are saying that Roma in the Byzantine Empire were taxpayers, but it was also a status that was transferred to them when they came in the Romanian principalities, because here the rulers also transformed them in slaves of the state. They were paying taxes, but after that he started to make donations to the monasteries and to the boyars. So in very big lines, I would say that this is the way in which the Roma became slaves in the Romanian territory. But I think that it's very important to share with you, if I don't know if I have 5 minutes more, I want to share with you something that I consider is very important, because it's regards the legislation. And I think if I will just read from the Caragia law, from example, from 18, there is a chapter regarding especially this population of the Roma slaves. So in the Caragia law says that all the slaves are somebody's property. This is the status of the gypsy in Wallachia. The second article says that all people born from slaves shall remain slaves. Article 3, all born from a slave mother shall be slaves. Also the case of Dinka. A gypsy's master has no power over his life. It was, de jure, but in fact, a gypsy's master is free to sell or donate him. All gypsies in Wallachia who cannot prove who their master is belong to the royal court. Also, there are some articles regarding the fact that if a particular person had in her possession a slave without papers, and without, if the state will ask for that person, the person that enslaved that person should pay some reparatory, I would say. So here, in function with the status of the person, with the skills of the person, that the owner should give some reparations. And also there are mentions regarding the for example, that gypsy who would marry a free woman, or the free man who would marry a gypsy woman without the knowledge of their masters shall be separated. However, if their master allow them to get married, then they shall remain together as free people, and their master shall be impaired. So what I want to say is that the slavery had in the Romanian principalities a legislation. In the 19th century, the legislation regarding the Roma slaves, I would say that it was very rich. So the 19th century gives us a very important overview on the situation of the Roma slaves. I wanted to show that by law, the Roma population, it was enslaved, and there were a few cases. Indeed, there were Roma that were free, but there were some special cases. Like the law says, all the Roma from the Romanian territory was enslaved, and they were their force of labor was used for centuries in the Romanian principalities by the monasteries, by the boyars, and by the state. I don't know if I have more time. I think.
I'm sure you have a lot to say, and it's so important to learn. Yes, if it's something that you want to add, feel free. We don't want to short.
Thank you. I want to add, for example, in order to give the floor to Magda and Marius, that there were laws that were saying that in the case that a daughter of a boyar had sexual relations with a slave, with a gypsy, with a Roma slave, they both must be killed. So it was like Petre Petcuț says in his book, it was a law inspired from the Old Testament, from the Bible, yes, and it shows that the Roma were de facto, they were considered on the same level with the animals, because it was something like zoophilia. So if we look to the legislation regarding the centuries immediately after the first attestation of the Roma in the Romanian territory, they are inspired morely from the church, and it is very interesting to see that the Roma were considered pagans, and special laws were given to baptize them, in the sense to make them to become like human beings. In the 18th century, in Moldova, it is given a law that was to forbid the separation of the children from their families. And the document says that we separated the children from their families until now, but from this moment, we will stop it, because also the gypsies, they are created by God. So it was during the slavery, it was a very important discussion on the way that Roma, if they were considered or not human beings. And I will stop here because Magda, I think she will say more. Thank you.
Marius, would you like to add anything, or we can move to the next question?
Well, I see Magda has returned, so I would rather that she continued with the presentation and talk, and then I'll come in. Okay,
great. Yeah, it's so powerful to learn about things that we didn't have a chance to learn when we were studying in Romania. At least I can speak for myself. You know, many of these things were not taught in schools, and it's a common loss. I mean, I feel like it's my loss of not knowing the history of my own country. But moving on, I would like to ask you, Magda, why do we argue that Roma enslavement, it's a racial enslavement? It's a big argument, and I know there are so many who detach from the idea, you know, it's really important in this time in history to take ownership of it. And I would like you to explain to us, to help us understand why the racial enslavement.
So first of all, good morning again, and thank you so much for the invitation. Please allow me to take a moment and really congratulate Alina Serban for this spectacular film, but also for her entire work throughout her career, because this is not the only film that looks at the Roma history in her work. She also produced and directed a play that is called The Great Shame. You may, I think, watch it online, but again, the play looks at the history of Roma enslavement, and I think it's important for us Romanians, Roma, and European citizens and global citizens to actually understand this piece of history through the lens of arts. And I do want to put emphasis on how important her work is. And then also to congratulate Adrian Furtuna, we call him Nicu in Romania, for his archival work. Because I think that there has been quite a bit of history written in Romania, but what Adrian and others are doing nowadays is really to bring more archives in the conversation. And that's so essential in discussing Roma enslavement. So I want to give you both that moment and say how grateful I am for your work. But indeed, I think to make an argument that Roma enslavement is racial enslavement, it's a bold step that I take, and some others join this conversation as well. But to me, I think it is important that when we conceptualize, understand, and address the legacy of Roma enslavement, we need to also think about it as a form of racial enslavement. And that is relevant both at the national and the global levels. But also, I think it's relevant for the purpose of theories, including global theories, and for the purpose of practice and how we address the legacy of enslavement. And Adrian talked about the origins of Roma enslavement, and he mentioned that although we have more clarity in what regards the sources of slavery, there are various competing theories regarding the origins of Roma enslavement. But in discussing these theories, I suggest that is fundamental to answer a question which is similar to the question that Winthrop Jordan asks in The White Man's Burden. And that question is why Africans specifically came to be slaves in the first place. And what he suggests in asking that question is that pre-existing racial and religious stereotypes about Africans offered Europeans this moral justification, if you want, to be able to sit on the deck of the ship, as Jordan would put it. And thus, to me, in the context of Roma enslavement, the question is why only Roma specifically, especially after 1400s, if we are to take back the Tatars' experience, remained enslaved for 500 years in the Romanian Principalities. Is it really a coincidence that Romanians seized a new people, newcomers who were non-white and non-Christians? If power and a political project targeted the people newly arrived in a given territories for those reasons, then I think the question is really, why aren't we talking about racism, or at least proto-racism, if we ought to use a term that Benjamin Isaac coined to refer to experiences of racism before the birth of the concept of race and the theories of races. And I believe that when discussing the history of anti-Roma racism, we have to start with this political project, because the enslavement was a political project which was justified through what we could call today cultural and race prejudice. And in that sense, we have to understand anti-Roma racism not in the way in which dominant majorities view Roma as gypsies. And I think this is the argument that helps some people to coin the term anti-gypsism. So I don't believe that prejudice was the driving force of racism, but I think it's important for us to understand and to unpack racism as a political project, if we ought to use the concept of that Francisco Betancourt puts in the conversation. And we have to think about racism, anti-Roma racism, as a system of domination and oppression, which was justified through race and cultural prejudice, and it involves power. So I think that when discussing racism, it's impossible to take the concept and the practice of power out of the conversation. And that leads me, and I'll talk only for a little bit more about this, to the global dimension of understanding enslavement as racial, Roma enslavement as racial enslavement, because Roma do not really have a place in the history of race and racism at the global level. And we also know that there are various theories regarding the origins of race, if we ought to understand race as descent. So in Europe, many historians, and I would like to hear Marius's points here. I read his book, but I would say that in Europe, many historians, but not only, they place the origins of racism or race in the birth of the theories of races. And yet, when we think about the theories of races, and place the origins of race there, we kind of cancel and neglect the reality of racial slavery, which was gradually justified through racist claims about the kidnapped and enslaved people, the Africans, shipped to the colonies, but also about the seized and enslaved people, the Roma. Both experiences, we have to say that they preceded the 18th and the 19th century and the theories of races. Thus, I argue that the invention of race as a practice happened before the invention of the theories of races, and I joined the school of thoughts of other scholars who say that, and I think that the invention of race as a practice in the case of Roma happened before seizing Roma as an enslaved people. And it's also interesting, and though very upsetting for me, to see that authors like Francisco Betancourt, who agreed that racism started before the theories of races, and in fact, he argues that racism started in the 12th, 13th century with the oppression of the Jewish and Muslim people in the Iberian region. But he says that in this context, Roma were an exception. And he argues that the type of oppression that Roma faced was not racism, although it was racism in the case of the other people. And it was not racism because the people, the Europeans, were afraid of Roma. So it was basically the persecution of a nomadic people who were persecuted because of their way of life. So it wasn't because of their race, but rather because of their way of life. And that's upsetting if you were to compare this argument also to the narrative about the Holocaust, when Roma are often forgotten and neglected, also because one of the narratives is that Roma were not exterminated because of racial grounds, but because of their criminality. And if you were to think about criminality put together with the people, that's definitely racial racism and racial segregation. So what I'm saying is that, first of all, there is no way of life of Roma. Not all Roma were nomadics. From the beginning of of their lives in Europe. I think that we see encounters of sedentary Roma in the 1300s in Bulgaria, but also in Greece in the 1400s, and plus, as Adrian mentioned, both the enslaved people were both nomadic and sedentary Roma. So there was some variety there as well. So the question really is, what kind of way of life are we really talking about, and how are we able to essentialize the Roma experience in such a racist way without being kept accountable for it? So to conclude, what I say is that for me, it is essential to place Roma in such global conversations, but in an accurate and anti-racist way. And at the same time, to consider a global perspective in understanding Roma and the different manifestations of anti-Roma racism across centuries and territories, including the experience of Roma enslavement.
Thank you, Magda. Powerful points and arguments. I heard you saying that you'd like to hear Marius' opinion on this.
Okay. Well, firstly, I should like to say that I couldn't agree more with what Magda was saying in terms of how we expand and integrate the history of Roma slavery within debates about the global history of race, before racism, global history of power relations, global history of coloniality. And if I'm not mistaken, I saw Manuela Botka there, who's a specialist in this. So I think that's the right direction to go forward. But I should like to add something to what Magda and Nico said in relation to what the topic of Roma slavery in a way represents for the Romanian majority, as it were. To me, the topic of Roma slavery is like a knife that cuts at the heart of Romanian history. It remains, however, largely unknown to Romanians, as Magda pointed out. And as you, Mihaela, said, you did not study about Roma slavery in schools. So the major historical narratives, which constitute the kernel of Romanian identity, do not include the Roma. So coming to terms with Roma slavery presupposes, in a way, a new philosophical anthropology, a new social ontology, which accepts two basic principles. One, the idea of belonging. In other words, the Roma belonged to and of shared destinies. So they're not separate, they're not outside history, they're not completely different people throughout history. They are part of the same vortex of history that created what in 19th century became Romania. The first thing I should like to say, I'll say three things. The first one is, in a way, to me, how unproblematic slavery is construed in Romanian imagination and scholarship and public discourse. Nico already mentioned about the scholarship. So on the one hand, there is a very careful dancing around the concepts of slavery in Romanian scholarship. Some authors refuse to use the word slavery. Some authors refuse to accept that what happened for 5 centuries was actually not slavery, but another form of bondage that quite conveniently can be called, in Romanian, there is another word that is often used, which is robie, which is basically a form of servitude. Now, it's interesting if I can make a small hermeneutical footnote here, because of course, if those of you who are Romanians will know that, if you're Romanian Orthodox, the word rob, which means servant, is used throughout the entire religious experience of an Orthodox person. When you say, I, the servant of God, eu robul lui Dumnezeu, aici zace liniștit Nicu. You could read this on a funeral cross. Here rests God's servant Nicu. So for the general population, the word rob and robie is in a way excised of its negativity. Because of course, if you say slavery and slaves, it's a completely different story. On the other hand, if you look at the high culture, Romanian high culture, elitist culture, there is a complete intellectual inertia behind any serious engagement with the history of slavery. And I do not mean here, of course, the extraordinary work being done by Roma scholars, but I mean the paragons, the luminaries of Romanian culture, which basically dictate the parameters of the conversation in Romania.
Sorry, if I may add, sorry, Marius, I just want to add a very direct example of me confronting this as an artist. Before Letter of Forgiveness, I wrote the play that Magda mentioned, The Great Shame. And I got an email from the Ministry of Culture actually censoring me, banning the word slavery from my press release, from my poster. So according to the contract we had, they reminded me that I cannot use the word slavery. So they said robie, the word that Marius mentioned. So obviously I as an artist, being the first one writing a play about this, not even starting to open the discussion, and I was being told how to. So, be careful. Let's not step in fire now. Let's take it slow, and not to mention how hard it was to take it to a public state theater, and how even now the play is not performed due to many interests of different people. So is indeed not a romantic topic, not a wanted topic, and even today, even with a CV as mine, it's still very hard for me to open the discussion. So sorry for interrupting.
Oh, no, thank you. Indeed, I appreciate that, because it confirms indeed what I was arguing for, that the high culture, the Romanian high culture, the way it's being conformed by its traditions, of course, ignores entirely not only the history of the Roma as not being constitutive of normativity, but also when the issue of terminology appears, they prefer strategically to use different terms. So 5 centuries of history basically are completely, occluded in this way. But connected to this, there is another point, and I'm extremely pleased that we watched a Letter of Forgiveness, because this relates to my second point, which is about historical agency. Roma are generally portrayed, when they are discussed in the public discourse, in the scholarship, by people as passive, as immobile objects, as people with no history, as unable of thinking with their own heads. In other words, they had very little awareness of their enslaved condition. Now we know that this is absolutely incorrect. Of course, it served the purpose of the Romanian national narrative, but it's incorrect historically. It's also incorrect humanly, because as you showed in your film, and we have historical documents about other case studies, particularly in the 19th century, Roma women in particular were very actively involved in liberating themselves. They didn't wait for someone to open the door to their cage. So that's another thing, is the discussion about historical agency, which is crucial in understanding, again, what Magda had alluded to in terms of the power in terms of how you portray the racism of these situations is extremely relevant. And the third point I should like to make, if I may, is about what can be called indeed the civilizing mission of the Romanian nation state, which after 1859, of course, attempted in a way to dissolve the binary Roma-Romanian. But they didn't attempt to dissolve it by a coherent program of cultural and social and political emancipation of both Roma men and women, but rather through neglect, or in some cases, through utter cynicism, the cynical hope that, just leave them alone, they will probably disappear, and if we're really, really lucky, they will actually leave. So that in itself is extremely important, because Nicu pointed out as well, you have this interplay between how they were portrayed before, when they were slaves, and how they were treated after the emancipation. And there is a very interesting legacy there to be explored. So Magda pointed out very correctly, slavery obviously was the product of a legal system, of a racial worldview, of cultural structures, of social policies. And these all together did not only impoverish the Roma, but I would argue they actually constituted the edifice upon which modern Romania was built. And it's extremely difficult to come to terms with that legacy, because you have to dig very carefully at the foundation of your own house. Like I said at the beginning, this is like a knife that actually cuts through, the fabric, the texture of the Romanian national identity, which is not as, hard as people think. Is rather much softer, and hence in danger of being, ripped apart. And people are literally unwilling to take that courageous step forward and say, well, let's see what happens if we actually come and embrace this. So I'm reminded here, and I will finish with this, by what one of the authors I used to read as a young man. His name is Marcus Garvey, the famous Pan-Africanist. And he says at some point, a people without the knowledge of their past, of their origin and of their culture, is like a tree without roots. But I would argue, and I think this conversation today and the commemorations we have this week proves exactly the following point. Roma are not a tree without roots. Their roots go deep into the Romanian lands. Their roots go deep into history. Thank you.
So beautifully said. And this is a question when I was starting to prepare this event, along with my friends and colleagues from Archer and with Otilia as well and Magda. One question that kind of lingered with me was how and why anti-Roma racism is still supported by good Romanian people. We are good people, and yet it's still there. And I don't have an answer for that question, and I don't expect any of you to give me that magic answer, but I'm posing this question just for an increased awareness, just for self-examination, for the work that we all need to do as humans in order to grow and to heal together from this traumatic experience that affects everyone. Both ends are affected by this incredible traumatic experience, historical traumatic experience. And I really appreciate and I thank you all for having the courage to speak up and to make history known. So that's all I have to say from the bottom of my heart.
May I add one point here, Mihaela, about this whole conversation about anti-Roma racism and how it's acceptable in Romania? And perhaps Alina can join this conversation because the two of us have talked about this quite a bit back home in Romania. But I think that when we talk about how accepted and acceptable anti-Roma racism is in Romania, as much as is across Europe, we do have to take into the consideration also the Roma side of this story. And as a Romanian myself, I think it's complicated. People in Romania ask me often, how do you feel, about Romania? And I feel like, well, this is a very complicated relationship, because on one hand, I'm Romanian, I'm a citizen of the country, I speak the language, I was educated in Romania, but at the same time, the country that I love doesn't really give me love back. So what it means for Roma people to be the citizens of a country and to love the soccer team, the national soccer team, to cry for the tennis players, to be part of the machine, but at the same time to be constantly told that you're not part of that context and you're not good enough for that context, that makes the things very complicated. And I think we have to give Roma credit, because we talk about oppression, but we have to talk about resistance as well, and love at the end of the day. And the fact that Roma were enslaved for 500 years, and these were moments when Roma mothers would raise the children of Romanian parents, and would make the houses be in order. But at the same time, how did Roma succeed to maintain this hope and love for the Romanian culture and the Romanian people, knowing that they have been through these experiences of oppression and racism for centuries? So we do have to question that. And I think that we do have to look at the humanity of our people back home, and to question that when incidents of anti-Roma racism happen, incidents of violence of police happen, we do have to speak up. And I think the least we could do as citizens is to raise those questions. But I do wonder how Alina feels about it.
Unmute.
Yes. This is a very complex relationship, because there are so many, as you know, good people, but they have their trained racism. I have seen a lot of good people with good intentions that would not be able to question their privileges, their generational privileges that lead him or her to be where they are now. So it's very, very complicated, even for me, when I tell my stories, to make sure again and again I come back to the humanity, as Magda was saying, because we come back to the relationships today between us, Roma and Romanians, and I myself, I'm still developing that relationship. I swear. Some years ago, and I will be blunt, I had nights when I could not continue living in Romania. My mom would find me on the floor, really on the floor, crying my soul out on the carpet, because I was in an event in a very posh so-called magazine that was so-called anti-racist, and they were doing this crows versus pigeons performance, and my stomach was out, and everybody was applauding. And it's hard to be the killing joy of many situations. Anyway, it's hard to be an artist that tells my stories, because at the beginning when I started, and thank you, Magda, and even in the activist Roma world, they would look at me as a weird creature, like, why would you say Roma stories? And why would you use theater and film to fight racism? Because it was weird, It was weird because the Roma activists were doing more like campaigns, anti-racist, with the flyers and all different types of instruments. And then the Romanians were seeing dances, exotic dances, from time to time having Roma being portrayed by non-Roma in a stereotypical way. So then I could not even like make space for my narrative, for my story, and even for living my truth. Because at one point you are asked to be someone else sometimes. Why are you not like the stereotype I've been hearing about? Because you're not hearing our stories, because there are no stories out there that would describe our humanity, our diverse humanity. Because obviously Romanians are so diverse. Obviously they are good, bad, ugly, fat, tall, short, la la la, gay, it doesn't matter, able, not able, handicapped, all that. But you don't see these stories about Roma people. You only see one story. So obviously we are so far back. I have to say, we are so far back. And then I don't even know how to behave sometimes when I am outside of the country. When I meet fellow Romanians, I have a guard up, I have to say, because I have been in a situation with other Romanian filmmakers representing Romania in Paris, and the Romanians really attacked me. I have to say, they attacked me for daring to say that in our country, it's a thing called racism. And they jumped on their feet and they attacked me verbally and said, take that back. And they were in a cultural event, you understand? My heart was beating so much because I knew I had to behave accordingly and be the nice one, so I would not reinforce stereotypes. So what I mean is that life is real, and life is in so many nuances, and we're still developing this relationship. I am with a small spoon trying to get to that humanity side that I'm still even myself trying to find. And I will finish with something that I hear my mom saying, and sometimes it's painful for me. I like her saying this, but sometimes it's painful because she looks at the TV and sees Romanians succeeding, and she says, Românii noștri, our Romanians. And it's painful then when she goes to the store and then she hears people saying very easily something about us being the gypsies, and not being the Romanians. So in this relationship of reject, so there's obviously many levels of this. And even I as a person, how would I grow up in a country where I only hear bad things about myself? I have to say, in the Great Shame, at one point I questioned Roma identity. And I have to say that in many times I would empathize with a Roma woman that maybe doesn't have anything from my background. Maybe she was rich and I don't know. Yeah, with a Roma, I would empathize that she goes on the same street with me. I will empathize with her more than with a Romanian woman. Why? Because we share the same rejection. Even though she might be rich, as I said, in a status way bigger than me. And it's painful for me to say, and I'm fearful of saying this in a academical way, let's say. I rather say that in my play, but I argue that even like rejection is so known to us. And I would just leave it there with ... Thank you for having me.
So powerful.
It is. I do have a question about collective amnesia that we seem to suffer from as Romanians together. And everything you say, Magda and Alina, about feeling not off out of place. And I think many of us who left feel this way because we do not identify with this discourse of you are with us if you perpetuate these stereotypes about all the people who have been marginalized in our history. And I think the fact that Romanians do not see archival work and history as being a form of empowerment and getting rid of their victimhood, you know, that they perpetuate from one generation to another, I think is really, here we have to look at a collective, you know, the phenomenon from a collective point of view. And I do have a question for Adrian. How much, and for every one of you, how much of the history of Roma slavery is known to the Roma people themselves? Because I know that Romanians have many, you know, we all know that there's not much known about it and the refusal to know about it.
Thank you very much for the question. It's very interesting. So I will try to answer from two perspectives. First, it's my personal perspective. And why I'm saying this? Because I remember that now 1 year ago, in a discussion with my parents and speaking with them about my PhD thesis on the social memory of Roma slavery, I started to give them historical information about the slavery. So I started to show them documents from this collection of documents that we published. There are documents with a very high level of emotional impact because they are speaking about the sellings of children and etc. And after that, I started to read them from a book. It's in Romanian, Păcatele Slugerului, and it's about, like Alina also said before, it's about the shame that the Roma suffered during the slave. And my father asked me, and do you think that it's good for the Romanians and for the Roma to know this history? And here we have the I consider in a way the trauma, because I started to heal this trauma, this cultural trauma, on my field research. And I will give you some examples. When I found a church that was established for the Roma slaves, and when the priest didn't refuse to speak in the front of the camera, but he wanted to tell the story of, in that moment, I was feeling that my body was healing from this trauma. Maybe, how to say, in Romania, this discussion on cultural trauma, and it's not so scientific, considered by the academia. But the impact of the fact that you don't know your history and you are not able to understand your present situation, because also I consider that the historians, the sociologists, and every that worked on this on the Roma issues, they took very little in consideration the slavery, because in a discussion, very beautiful also, that we had last evening with Marius and with other two Roma historians, they explained very well what was the impact, the social, economic impact of the slavery on the Roma population. And today, when we try to explain our social, cultural situation, we we don't look to the slavery. And I'm sure that this is the main element, the main factor that can explain also the distance between Romanians and Roma population, because from the slavery started the program of the Roma assimilation and also cultural assimilation. So from what I saw on also on the field, for example, when I started to present my methodology research in the front of my PhD commission, they asked me, but what do you will find on the field after more than 150 years after this event? So I said, I think that I will find something. And I found very interesting things in the Roma communities, where we can find today mnemonics that are making direct reference to the slavery. So I want to share my screen with you, if it is okay now, to present some. So this was part of an exhibition that I realized last year on the oral maps of the Roma slavery in Romania. So here we have a little church, but what it's important is that it was built very near to a monastery, Monastery Bistrița. And this monastery had, along of the time, a very important number of Roma slaves. So this little church was established especially for the Roma slaves of the monastery. The distance between the monastery and this church, it's like a half kilometer, I would say. What is interesting for us today, also the cemetery that you can see, it is labeled in the collective mental in that village that it's like the cemetery of the gypsies. When I was walking to this place, I met two old Roma women, and one of them told me that her sister died in a village like 3 kilometers distance from this village, Bistrița. And all the Romanians from that village asked to be buried here in Bistrița, because also today in the collective mental, this is the place destined for the Roma. So in a discussion with Petre Petcuț, a Roma historian, he was saying, Nicu, we must do their archaeological research, because I'm sure that we will find something, some artifacts from the Roma slaves. This is not the only case. Here, it's another situation. Here, it's the monastery Horezu. It's a very well-known monastery in Romania, and also the number of slaves that had along of the time, it was very high. And here, it's the monastery, down, and this little church, it's very, very near. It's in the left side of the entrance in the monastery. So we have another confirmation of the fact that the slaves were separated by the majority population. And also what it's interesting to mention is that the name of the first church was Țigănia, but now the name was changed in Biserica Nașterii Maicii Domnului. Okay. Here also here in Horezu, it was very hard to find even that the people that I interviewed, Romanians, they said, but I know the Romas that are still living now here, but I don't think that it's good to send you to speak with them, because it will be a problem, because they don't want to be labeled as gypsies, you know, if you will go to speak with them. Other situations, because we were speaking about the fact that Roma were slaves of the monasteries, of the boyars. Here we have another case, interesting. It's a village with the name Țigănești. Yeah, so it's like the gypsy village. Also being interested in this idea of mnemonics, I visited this village. Here it's the boyar court and the domain, but today it's no one still living here. It's abandoned. And here in the center, it's the logofăt Costache Conache, and his father was a very important owner of Roma slaves. Even that we have here these mnemonics, like the name of the village and the statue of Costache Conache in the center of the village. The Roma from here, they don't know nothing about Roma slavery, because I return to the main question, what the Roma know about. They don't know nothing about Roma slavery, but what is very interesting is the fact that they know, they have informations in the collective memory about the daughter of Costache Conache. They remembering her name and so on, but nothing about the fact that they were slaves. What I want to underline, because also I visited Tismana, that was the place where the Roma were attested for in the documents for the first time. In Tismana, the Roma were aware, were conscient by the fact that they were slaves of the monastery. And in a discussion with an old Roma lady, she anticipated my question, and she said, oh, do you want to ask if the slavery had consequences in our community? And I said, yes. And what it was very, very interesting, just a moment, because I want to share with you something after that. It's important, because that lady also wrote a monography of Tismana, of the Roma from Tismana. So she said, Do you want to know if the slavery had consequences? No? Yes. Okay, I will tell you. You must know that even today in the church, in the monastery, Tismana, we stay separated. The Roma are in a part and the Romanians are in a part. And she said, but you know something, it's not something like we feel discriminatory. It's something normal for us. I mean, this is the situation for, in fact, for centuries it was. But, and also in Tismana, they were running to not be labeled with the name Gypsies or Roma. No. We are like, the first argument that they were bringing to me, it was, you know, we were slaves of the monastery, and after that, Alexandrian Cuza gave us land. And we are like good Romanians. We are like this, we are on the same level with Romanians. So it's very interesting because I remember some parts from the conference that we had last evening with Marius, with Petre Petcuț and Bogdan Chiriac, regarding the measures that were taken after the abolition of the slavery. In the documents, the Roma are named like emancipated people, like emancipated. And also Bogdan Chiriac presented, and Marius, and there are some journalists that are saying the new Romanians. So the impact that the slavery had on our identity, it was indeed very, very powerful. What we should do us today, it's to unbox this history that was, you know, taught along the time. Also, I want to speak a little bit about this. This is
Adriana, I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is an amazing presentation, and I think all the documentation is valuable. Is there any way you can just, you know, go through the slides, and so we can leave some time for questions from the
audience? I will finish in 1 minute.
Okay.
Also, I think that the work that it's undertaken by Alina, and I think it's very important what she mentioned, that she received that email. Don't use that word, because also regarding the memory, it's very important. And here we have this ticket that was given to the slaves in 1848. And we use this ticket like a very important mnemonic. But also behind this ticket, it's another story, in the fact that the revolution from 1848 wasn't successfully. And the Roma slaves that were that received this ticket of liberation, after that, they were re-enslaved. So it's also, I want to underline the fact in which today we, the Roma, we try to give a new understanding and to label the history in order to understand better our identity. Thank you, and sorry being so long.
Yeah, thank you so much. Is it possible to end? Okay, great. Thank you so much. That's so powerful. One thing I would like to quickly mention, that I'm going to leave from this incredible conversation with the understanding that it's imperative for us as Romanians to realize that the daily Roma experience is very different than the non-Roma experience. And with that, I would like to ask Magda to close with a few words of telling us what forms of reparations are needed. It's clearly that we need that. So if you can summarize, I would be grateful to let everybody know. If you can let everybody know what we can do, what kind of reparation is needed.
Yeah, so many of you may know that the topic of reparations has been a relevant and important conversation in various parts of the world. We are talking in the United States about reparations for the enslavement of Black Americans. We are talking in the former colonies about enslavement. And I think that part of the work that I do at Harvard together with Jacqueline Baba is really to connect the experience of Roma with these other global conversations so that we aim together for more coherent and more coordinated conversations on what reparations should look like. And in a volume that is called Time for Reparations and will be issued in a month or so, we look at reparations from various perspectives. So in the case of Roma enslavement per se, what we suggest in our work are five forms of reparations. One of them is truth-telling, the other one is memorialization and memorialization of resistance. The third one is apology, which may seem simple, but the Romanian institutions and the Romanian church, but also the beneficiaries of the Roma enslavement have not apologized yet, none of them. But we also talk about compensations and some sorts of reform, anti-racist reforms at the political, cultural, and social level. What I want to underline is the fact that when the enslavement ended with the final act of abolition in 1856, about 250,000 Roma or more, the number is not really clear, were freed, but they didn't receive any property, any compensations, any support. At the same time, similar to the experiences of other peoples in other systems of enslavement, the owners, the so-called owners, and by that I mean the enslavers, they received financial compensations in return for freeing the slaves. So that's an important element in this conversation, and it's as true in Romania as it's true in other parts of the world. So financial compensations are a big portion of this conversation, but in order to get to that point, we need to reestablish the National Commission to study the legacy of enslavement. We had one in 2007, which was put together by the government together with some Roma historians, but the commission died like months after. So we need to reestablish that commission to write a report about the legacy of enslavement and then suggest all these forms of reparations. Truth-telling is mandatory in this conversation. As you said, Roma don't know about their history of enslavement. Romanians don't know or refuse to know about this reality, but we all carry the waters of our ancestors, as Professor Hafiz would say. So I think it's important for all of us, first of all, to face the truth, and second of all, to heal. And to create spaces for reconciliation and healing, spaces that are for both Roma and majority Romanians.
Thank you so much. I really hope that this conversation will continue at some other time in the future, but I would like now to ask Andrea if she has any summary. I would imagine there are many questions from the audience, and if we can hear some of them and give them some answers, that would be great.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know how much time do you have, because there are so many questions and so many comments, and I appreciate both the panelists, but also the participants who even had a lovely debate here on one of your questions. So I will phrase them as they came. And I don't know how much time you have. I don't know how much time the panelists have, but I will just start with I think that was the first one. Some of the questions are personal questions because there are Roma participants here and they have personal questions, and it's part of the healing, way of this debate as well. So one of our participants is asking, when we do ancestry tracing with 23andMe, how does Roma ancestry present? I don't know if one of you can answer that.
That's a long conversation, but personally, I don't believe in DNA and ancestry.com as roots to live to an experience and to be part of a people. I think that lived experiences, cultures, and history and other aspects would, help you understand your roots much more than genetics, which in itself, I think it's a very sensitive and unnecessary item in defining peoples and identities.
Yeah, could I just say something, because I regrettably need to go, but that's a very interesting question. I'll give you a very good example. You may not be familiar with him, although he was quite popular in the States as well at some point as a big supporter of Donald Trump. It's a very interesting character we have here. His name is Piers Morgan, and he has a morning show here. At some point, he did exactly this test. So he's in a way the epitome of English person, both in terms of what he says, but also the way he behaves. So he loves cricket, of course, and he loves smokes cigars, and he drinks pints of beer. However, he did this test that you mentioned, and it turned out he had absolutely no English blood in him at all. He was 17% Eastern European, and about 80% he was Celtic. Welsh or Irish. So you have someone who's so quintessentially English, defined culturally, linguistically, and of course, I suppose historically to some extent. However, he was extremely surprised to find out that according to the test he did, he didn't have any English heritage. So there you go. That's probably one answer to that particular question. Well, thank you very much. I should like to say good night and goodbye.
Thank you, Marius Turda.
It was a pleasure to see you and learn from you again. And thank you for supporting us in the work we do.
Anytime.
Another question is related to Alina's powerful film. And somebody says, as a Roma woman, I'm so grateful for your incredible work, and thank you to the wonderful panelists and scholars for your scholarship and activism about our history and for this event today. And this is a question for Alina. How can we help make this a feature film?
Not sure if Alina is still with us at this moment.
I'm sorry, my signal is very bad, so the video is still, it's not really properly working, so I will just use voice.
Yes.
Oh my God, yeah. There are, now to put it blunt, I'm sorry for not being idealist and romantic for this question, is that, yeah, in order to make a production like this, obviously there is the involvement of what means resources, financial resources. So I'm not sure how should I address this now. And I just have to say that this has been, as I said, an impossible dream that together with some idealist people we achieved. This is not just my film, it's our film of the team. And we could keep the discussion, and I just hope someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows someone might be so idealist as me and say, yes, Alina, how much money do you need for making that film? Oh, sure. Let me grab some other friends and let's make it happen. sorry for being so cynical, but this is the realistic path I had to take. I had knocked at Roma culture institutions for this film, and I have not been successful there either. But I have knocked at supermarkets, at places where people haven't knocked for a film. And I succeeded with a creative hustle, but only for a short. I would not achieve this by going to supermarkets, obviously. So nevertheless, I'm very grateful for everybody who supported my journey all these years, and I really have to mention Magda for looking at me with empathy and giving me a chance back in 2009 when nobody really was believing in what I was doing, and she did. So I just have to say thank you for the question, and that's it.
And keep knocking. Keep knocking.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
If I may have a suggestion, if we don't have time to go over all the questions, can we put them in the comments on the video? And hopefully, you know, everybody who is here and has a Facebook account and follows Archer can answer some of the questions, maybe later or tomorrow, whenever you have time. And now, possibly, I would say we have time for another 2 questions.
Mm-hmm. There are 3 more, but let me just choose 2 more. Somebody saying that, yes. So I have learned from census and other official documents that my ancestors were slave owners. However, they would have been considered middle-class farmers with usually no more than 5 slaves. Was this true in Romania, or was slaveholding limited to boyards, monasteries as the state?
I will try to give an answer. Okay. In the collection with documents that we published, we have a very interesting case of a child. In 2 days, this child is sold between 3 masters. The last owner that buys this Roma child gives the child, says the document, head for head for the ransom from the social state of Romania. It was another social estate, but it was on another level than the slavery. So I want to say that there were particular persons that could buy slaves, and the ownership of the slaves was not like a monopoly only of the monasteries or the boyars or the ruler. No, the particular persons could have in property slaves.
Thank you. And the last question so far would be, how much was Roma slavery localized to the Romanian Principate versus some of the neighboring countries like Bulgaria, Serbia, Hungary?
Unfortunately, I cannot give a very academic answer on this issue because first of all, I am not an historian, but like also Marius answered to this question in the chat. In the Romanian principalities, it was very common situation to have slaves, but in that period, like I also Viorel Achim speaks about this in his book. It wasn't so spread like in Romania.
Thank you. I just want to add the fact that, as Mihaela said, the rest of the questions, we'll add them to the chat on Facebook, and we are grateful for all the comments that the multitude of comments that we have on our Facebook event. It looks like a very important discussion, and thank you all for participating and for the lovely panelists. And also somebody suggested to, and is appreciating to have a list of readings available on Roma from Romania and Eastern Europe generally, and on the research. And after the event, we'll ask the panelists to provide us with a list, and we'll post it, and we thank you.
Thank you
so much. You are you know, the most resilient one, Adrian. You are here with us till the end. And that's because we ran, you know, a little bit over our time, which is a good thing. It seems that everybody enjoyed and participated. We had a lot of questions and comments in the chat, and I'm so grateful that we were able to organize this event, that it was urgent and imperative to have. Thank you again, everyone who participated. I really appreciate Otilia's support. Everyone from United States who was present, from Europe as well. And we hope to see you again to future events. And we hope we'll address more urgent, important issues that we have to talk about. You know, it's really a need in this time of history to address issues, to be bold, to have the courage, the bravery, to speak about the unspoken, and to give credit to everyone who went through hardship and you know, hear their stories. I think telling stories is what we really need at this moment in time. Thank you, Otilia. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us today. And Otilia, if you want to add a few words at the end, feel free to do so.
No, I just want to say that I'm very happy that Archer was formed. We feel like our work is completed in a way. We have been trying, both with the Romanian Film Festival, to bring films that talk about social justice in Romania and what we need to do through art and, you know, through academic research and in terms of memory formation, because I do believe that as a people who went through a lot, we suffer of collective amnesia, and we cannot live the present and make it better for all of us in diaspora or in Romania if we do not face our demons and talk about them. So I'm very, very happy to be to contribute a little bit to this movement, and I will support your work, and Archer and Adrian and Marius and Alina and Magda with all the forces that we can. We are allies in this, and I'm happy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the day and weekend, and see you at the next event.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.